Sonic Movieverse Book 2, Gotta Go Fast, Chapter 5 The Master Emerald. The last thing Tom expected to ever encounter in Hawaii was snow. Well, the world was weird, and maybe in a distant future, the island would eventually get a light snowfall. But no, this was a whole avalanche, and it burst through thin air, narrowly missing the wedding guests. And then, through the confusion and mass panic, Tom could swear he heard a familiar scream and caught sight of a very familiar blue blur tumbling through the snow. The sheriff immediately stood up, rushing toward the downed hedgehog, who was hugging something orangish. Was that Tails?
Sonic.
Maddie beat him to the punch as he found her crouching down next to the two Mobians. Sonic was cooing, still tightly holding onto his little brother.
It's okay, sweetie. You can let go of him. I need to take a look at him. Can you let me do that?
What is going on here?
Rachel screeched, catching her sister off guard.
Thomas Wachowski, what is the meaning of this?
Maddie groaned.
Now's not the time, Rachel.
The woman scoffed.
Darn right. This is my wedding.
She gasped, finally registering the presence of the familiar hedgehog, then the peculiar-looking fox in his arms.
Oh, great. There's two of them now.
Tom threw his sister-in-law a sheepish look.
Listen, I'll explain later, but right now we have to get them out of here and...
He was interrupted by a shot. The crowd gasped as Sonic fell into the snow with a screech, trapped in an electric net. Tom protested, making strides toward his two charges.
You can't do that to him.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wachowski, but we must.
Claimed a man who stepped forward from the crowd, stopping Tom in his tracks. The sheriff recognized him as the Olive Garden man who had shown up to his and Maddie's house after the first Robotnik fiasco. From the look on his wife's face, so had she.
Where are you taking them?
She asked, shaken from watching the two unconscious aliens she was so fond of be rolling manhandled into small cages. The agent dismissed her, turning his back on the concerned married couple.
I'm afraid it's classified information. I suggest you stay out of it. If you get further involved with these alien life forms, why you claim to know nothing of their whereabouts, the guardian units of nation will pursue you in justice.
Tom scoffed.
Don't really, are we supposed to just trust you?
He took a few steps towards the man, ignoring the agents training their own guns at him.
Listen, I'm Tom Tiefler, and not letting you take them anywhere without my say-so.
Tom.
Rachel's fiance, Randall, intervened.
Don't make us do anything brash.
The soon-to-be wed woman stood by, overcome with shock.
Randall?
She asked, her voice wavering. Tom paused, turning a withering glare onto the fake fiance before throwing a punch to his face without warning. It didn't take long for the other gun agents on the scene to surround and subdue the man.
You won't get away with this.
He yelled then as he was taken away along with the downed hedgehog and fox. The Olive Garden man turned once more to Maddie, who was itching to throw herself into the fray to rescue her husband and honorary children.
I wouldn't do anything.
The man warned, holding her in her thoughts. Then
Stay out of it, Mrs. Wachowski.
he walked away, ordering one of his closest agents to keep watch over the two sisters. Maddie scoffed, turning to her sister.
Can't believe this. This is a nightmare.
You're telling me I had to find out that Randall, blasted sorry excuse of a man, was faking this whole thing on the day of my wedding.
The woman retorted, booming.
I'm so sorry, Rachel. I swear I didn't know this would happen.
Rachel looked her sister dead in the eye.
Oh no, that is not your fault, Maddie. Don't make me repeat this. But it is not Tom's fault either. And I have a feeling you two are about to pull me into another one of your messes, and I am feeling a little extra aggressive at the moment, so show me what you've got before I change my mind and regret this whole experience.
Maddie grinned, patting the woman's shoulder before pulling a familiar device from her purse. She clutched the gift that Tails had given her in the palm of her hand.
It's now or never,
she thought, pursing her lips in concentration as the gun soldier, who had noticed her pulling what looked like a weapon out, charged her, and she threw it at his feet, watching as he slowly flew upwards with no signs of stopping anytime soon.
What the?
Rachel muttered in disbelief.
He's gonna come back down, right?
Maddie shrugged her concern off, determined to rescue her family.
how so? Come on, let's get him.
While the sisters teamed up, Sonic stirred, feeling his entire body in motion as he lay against a cold, hard surface. He slowly opened his eyes, groaning at the unexpected soreness of his muscles. Behind him, he could hear a familiar voice telling somebody off. He blinked the blurriness away and found himself trapped in a moving cage, which made him gasp.
Sonic.
The yell jolted him out of his stupor as he turned, facing the direction of the voice. He found Tom, in handcuffs, being escorted along with him and Tails, who lay in another cage, still unconscious.
Tom!
He exclaimed, feeling panic creep up his spine.
Tails, wake up.
He turned to face the agent pushing his cage around.
Hey, he needs medical attention.
The agent waved him off, no sign of concern on his face whatsoever. Sonic ignored him, trying to reach Tails through the bars of his cage.
Wake up, little buddy. Come on.
He begged, his voice coy and desperate. The sheriff watched the exchange with a pang of sadness in his eyes. He was beyond angry at the entire situation, but watching the hedgehog and fox he came to see as his sons, both with various degrees of injuries, and knowing he could do nothing for them in his current position rendered him frustrated. Soon the tribe was led into a secluded room. The cages were left to the side, while Tom was handcuffed to a beam next to the cages. None of his protesting or Sonic's begging deterred the agents, and they were left alone, hearing the door shut with a resounding click. The human rested his head against the beam with an exasperated sigh. Things had just gotten a whole lot messier, and there was nothing he could do. He had never felt so helpless. It didn't help that he had to hear Sonic's pleas for the young fox to wake up, in vain, despite his own worry. The least he could do at the moment was comfort his oldest charge.
But he's gonna wake up soon, like, all we gotta do is sit still and calm and hope you can.
He has to.
Sonic whispered, still trying to reach out for his young friend. He slumped against his cage, defeated.
It's all my fault.
Tom frowned.
You didn't cause any of this.
But I did.
The hedgehog protested, finally facing the human.
I got him involved in this mess. I have no idea how Robot got back, but Tails never would have been injured so much if it hadn't been for him just knowing me.
Wait, hold up.
The sheriff interrupted.
Robonac is beyond this. The man is back, and he's the one who did this.
He steadied himself, making sure to catch the hedgehog's guilty gaze.
If the crazy man is back, then not only we are. Listen to me, Sonic, it's not on you now. For any of this to happen, do your best to stop him.
The Boommobian averted his gaze to the ground, unable to keep eye contact with his guardian.
But I couldn't stop him, and Tails got hurt.
Did you hurt him?
No, but...
Then it's not your fault, guys. We'll get right to that moment.
On cue, the Duke could hear someone fiddling with the doorknob. On edge, the two of them tensed, staring daggers at the door, but their look turned to surprise when the person walking in turned out to be Maddie. Her husband smiled relieved.
Right on, Tom Mig.
Maddie?
Sonic exclaimed, pressing his body against the bars of his cage.
Maddie, Tails is badly hurt and no one checked on him. You gotta help him.
She nodded.
I will, Sonic, but you need to calm down, okay? We'll get out of here, and then I can check up on him. I need you to take a deep breath right now.
As she soothed the hedgehog, she worked quickly, unlocking Tom's handcuffs, then the cages. Immediately, Sonic sprang forward, giving the surprised humans a hug each. He then wrapped his arms around the kit's unconscious form, cradling the boy against him, waiting for his guardians to follow him.
Yeah, we'll be right behind you.
He ordered. The hedgehog didn't need to be told twice. He rushed out of the gun base, protectively clutching Tails in his arms. He stopped further away on the beach, not wanting to leave the humans behind but still hoping to have kept enough distance between himself and his new enemies. He softly deposited his little brother onto the sandy ground, leaning him against a palm tree out of sight. He began to pace, slightly panicked when he couldn't immediately see Tom and Maddie, but he breathed a sigh of relief when the human couple came into view, running in his direction. He glanced at Tails again before rushing toward his guardians, readily accepting their embrace.
I am so glad you are okay, kiddo.
Maddie started with a warm smile.
You boys can't stop worrying us for a second, can't you?
As Sonic's face fell, the woman frowned, gently cupping his head.
Hey, it's okay. You have us now. You can rely on us. You are not alone anymore, Sonic.
Still, the Blue-Mobian remained silent, feeling sudden guilt overtake him. He couldn't allow any harm to fall onto the two humans he held close to his heart. He couldn't involve them, or anybody else, into his mess. It was his and his alone to deal with.
Sonic!
The hedgehog quickly turned, taking notice of his little brother, who attempted to stand. Finally awake, he watched as the fox struggled before falling back down onto the sandy ground with a whimper. Holding onto his bruised side, Sonic sped over to him, ignoring Tom and Maddie's concerned calls.
Hey, don't move, you're hurt.
He soothed, gently cupping Tails' head.
Sonic!
The fox groaned, grabbing onto the Blue-Mobian's arm for support.
We can't let Buddy get that emerald!
Sonic pursed his lips, knowing full well that the kid was right.
I know, buddy, and I'll stop him. You need to stay safe with Maddie and Tom.
Tails weakly protested, staring directly at his brother's eyes.
Now I can't let you do it. I want to help you.
Sonic offered a gentle smile, trying to fight back tears.
I almost got you killed. I can't let anything bad happen to you.
He sighed, gathering the child in his arms, mindful of the kid's bruises as he wrapped his arms around him, offering comfort. Tails immediately melted into the hug, squeezing Sonic with as much strength as he could muster.
Sonic, please let me come with you.
He whispered.
I'm sorry, buddy. I'll be back before you know it. Stay with Tom and Maddie.
The hedgehog softly replied, releasing his trembling brother. Then he sped away, ignoring the single tear that shed from his eyes and the desperate calls of his name. In the middle of the ocean, on a remote island, a human and Echidna stepped out of a warp ring, the former holding a magical compass in his hands.
This is it.
He chuckled, giddy. He handed the compass over to the Mobian, who had brushed some sand off of what looked to be a stone slab. In the middle of the spot, a circle big enough to fit the compass was exposed, giving Knuckles the opportunity to set the object in immediately. It began to glow, lighting a path into the water. The two stood to attention, wary of any nasty surprise, before the water burst into an explosion, caving in on itself to reveal a massive temple.
One step closer to the precious Master Emerald. Oh, my angry friend. Not a moment to lose.
Making their way through the maze and the booby traps proved to be quite a challenge, but Knuckles easily rose to the occasion, instinctively leading the Mad Doctor through and breaking any obstacle that he could, dodging fire, axes, arrows, and even a boulder. His final obstacle turned out to be a simple wall. He easily broke through, watching as the rubble fell, satisfied. A green glow greeted the two, The Echidna broke out of his stupor first, slowly but determinedly making his way toward the glowing emerald on the impressive altar.
Finally, the Master Emerald, I have made it.
Yes, indeed.
The human behind him hummed.
It's a shame you won't get to enjoy it.
What?
The red Mobian Roly halted, facing Robotic, who shot him a devilish smirk, an evil twinkle in his eyes.
You didn't think I came here unprepared, did you?
With the push of a button, a legion of robots came flying through the wall Knuckles had punched through, surrounding the injured Echidna.
Liar!
He yelled, taking on an offensive stance, ready for battle. Many emotions ran through his mind, such as confusion, guilt, fury, but most of all, the heart of betrayal sent a pang to his heart and hurt.
I trusted you. You were my friend.
Robotnik cackled, bathing in the look of sheer despair on the Echidna's face.
You poor naive creature. It's not your fault. A more advanced intellect would have seen this coming a mile away.
As Knuckles' face fell, the doctor pointed right at him.
Robots, finish him.
Immediately, the machines complied, firing laser shots at the Mobian, who expertly dodged. Yet, he quickly found himself overwhelmed, and despite the speed in which his fists could help him take down robots, every time he destroyed one, a new one appeared to take its place. The more he attempted to get closer to the emerald, the more he was pushed back farther away from it. He growled, bumping his two fists together, which sent a shockwave that destroyed the robots at closest proximity to him. With a shout, he threw himself into the fray, completely forgetting about the Mad Doctor, who had made his way to the emerald. Knuckles caught sight of him out of the corner of his eye, which caused him to get distracted and take a laser blast aside. With a shout, he went down. The only thing he could hear was Robotnik's crazed cackling as he took over the Master Emerald, absorbing its power for himself. A blinding green glow filled the entire room, forcing him to close his eyes. With a flash and an explosion, the Mad Doctor was gone and the sacred temple began to crumble in on itself, allowing water to pour into the room in tidal waves. His ears could barely make out a loud cracking sound, and he blinked base, heading right for him. He wouldn't have time to dodge it. Something suddenly pushed him out of the way, and he grunted, catching himself. He shook his head against the deafening rumbling of the ruins and the rushing water, taking a peek at his savior, which proved to be a familiar blue blur.
Come on.
Sonic yelled, sidestepping as a boulder crushed the ground right where he'd stood.
We have to get out of here.
The Blue Mobian held onto Knuckles' wrist, knowing full well that while the older of the two was fast, he could get the two of them out faster.
Hold on, Knuckles.
He began to run when his charge held onto him more tightly, dodging falling pieces of rubble and bursts of water as fast and best as he could. When the hedgehog made it closer to the surface, he began to struggle with his sight, being sprayed in the face by splashes of water. Noticing this, Knuckles braced himself, and when the other Mobian gave himself an extra boost to breach the surface, the Echidna helped, allowing the two to soar through the air and land onto the unbothered sand. Sonic cawed, sitting down against a boulder to catch his breath. Meanwhile, the red creature also sat a few feet away, lost in the events that had unfolded could only spell disaster. He couldn't believe he had been so blind-eyed as to miss just how crazy and deceitful the human could be. Yet one question nagged at the back of his mind more so than the rest.
Why did you send me?
The Echidna asked, breaking the silence. Sonic didn't need to ponder his answer.
My fight was with Robotic, never with you. You didn't deserve what he did. I knew he had to be tricking you, innocent person, or a Mobian in our case, would ever team up with a man like him.
Knuckles averted his gaze to the ground, a feeling of shame trickling onto him.
Your young friend, he tried to warn me. I did not stick to him. I have injured him. I did not want to. I apologize.
I'm not the one you need to say sorry to, but I'm sure he'll understand if you just explain.
You avoided me so easily.
The hedgehog nodded.
He's not the type to hold a grudge. He might be a little worried for a while, but he'll come around, trust me.
I am not sure I am in a position to trust so soon.
The older Mobian hesitantly admitted.
But you have given me no reason not to so far. For humanity's sake, I shall readily put my feelings of doubt aside until the threat is properly dealt with.
Sonic grinned.
I can get behind that. Now come on, we gotta figure out a way to get off this island pronto. You wouldn't happen to have earrings on you.
At this, the Echidna paused, mulling the idea over. After a few seconds, he shook his head.
I do not. I assume that you...
Yes.
Sonic sighed.
I left my rings with Tails. Didn't want to risk losing them in the ocean.
Sonic!
Surprised and on high alert already, both the hedgehog and Echidna stood to attention, searching for the origin of the yell, until the sound of a plane engine eagerly reached their ears. Both of them turned toward the sound, spotting a red biplane with a familiar fox as the pilot. Sonic began to wave his arms around with a gent grin on his face.
Hey, Tails? Over here.
The hedgehog then faced Knuckles, who awkwardly stood by.
I don't think he can land here, so get ready to jump on the wings.
The oldest Mobian's mouth gaped.
Jump on a moving aircraft? Are you insane?
Well, saying crazy, just to name a few.
The blue blur winked.
Now come on, wouldn't want to be left behind.
That would be dishonorable.
Kidding.
I dislike Betty Noah.
All right, we'll work on that.
The hedgehog braced himself, and Knuckles followed.
On my mark. 1, 2, 3, jump.
Both Mobians soared through the air, rudely yet successfully landing onto the extended wings of the biplane. Knuckles immediately held onto the right side, while Sonic shifted to the other wings, giving the fox a pat in his hand.
Perfect timing, buddy.
Thanks.
Tails replied, his tails happily swishing behind him.
Are you two okay?
Sonic nodded, then realizing the fox may rather be paying attention to the ski, and
You're right, fine, but we have to get to Robotic right now. He has the Emerald and he's extremely dangerous. Like, more than usual.
at that, the youngest Mobian nodded with a grim yet focused expression on his face.
We don't have a second to lose. They'll get us there in a flash.
How will we get there? Exactly.
Knuckles inquired, startling the duo out of their conversation.
Pardon me for intruding, but surely we are quite a ways away from the doctor's known location.
The kid nodded in agreement.
We are, but when the time is right, I'll send a warp ring to Green Hills. The plane would never have enough fuel to get us there otherwise. Just hold tight until we get the signal.
Satisfied and a little restless, the Echidna nodded. As the tray flew, Knuckles couldn't help but throw a few glances at the kit. Despite the treatment he had endured while in Robotnik's hold, despite the beating he had taken from the Echidna's own fists in that missile, the fox seemed as cheerful as he could be. He himself kept his eyes on the ski for the most part, but would take a peek at his blue friend with a bright smile that reached his tired eyes. And Sonic, who seemed to bask in the young Mobian's joy, would mirror his gaze, throwing a wink or two before looking forward, a focused glaze falling on his own eyes. Eventually, Tails turned to look at Knuckles, who froze, not expecting the action. Yet, the fox threw a tentative smile at him, ears lightly flicking with the wind. Knuckles shot him what he felt looked like a smile, but likely looked more like a grimace. Yet, Tails grinned wider, if possible, before looking forward once more. Knuckles found himself fighting embarrassment. The kid's look had said everything that needed to be said.
I'm glad you're here and on our side.
The Echidna felt overwhelmed at the amount of support pouring out of a child who, by all means, should still be afraid of him or at the very least, ignore his presence. Yet, he almost seemed comforted by it. Perhaps his presence had indeed brought him a sense of comfort back at Robotnik's base. In a twisted sense of the word, a beeping sound jolted him out of his thoughts.
Did you hear that?
He exclaimed, worried that it may be a sign of the enemy. Instead, the young pilot grinned, showing the small device he had strapped onto his wrist.
Yup, that was the signal fire that rings Sonic.
I'm on it, Captain.
The hedgehog threw a warp ring a ways away in front of the biplane, and the trio flew right through it, finding themselves over a quaint little town.
What is that?
In the middle of town, a massive black cloud loomed with green lightning bolts shooting out in every direction.
It looks like he's building something in there.
Tails pointed out, and sure enough, the trio could catch glimpses of metal within the threatening cloud. Whatever it was massive. Yet, the Blue Mobian, despite the nerves attempting to take over his body, sported a grin on his face. He braced himself against the wing, prompting his little brother, and knew only to follow suit.
Let's do it to it.